But this is how Hollywood works when it comes to influencing what they want. They want funding, they want access, they want distribution, and they want protections. And of course, we're talking about all this stuff financially, right? And government agencies, what they want is a favorable perception, trust, and they want compliance. At the end of the day, that's just what they want, okay? The trade-off is you show us in a good light, we give you what you want. And unfortunately, Hollywood bends over backwards, and that's just how the partnership works.
Try to live well and prosper. Don't trust your doctor. Ruthless with my wordplay. No, I'm not a shotter, but I got them hits, man, coming straight out the barrio. That's why I'm hip hop sicario. I like my privacy. I show out every now and then.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rolo Runs the City podcast. I am your host, Rolo, and I'm absolutely grateful for you guys hanging with me today. Of course, I have another great episode that is coming to you, but before we do that, you guys already know the particulars, baby. You guys can reach me on all the socials that I am about to list off. You got Instagram and Facebook at Rolo Runs the City podcast, also at Rolo Runs the City Music if you want to check out the music side. I also am on TikTok now at Rolo Runs the City _. That is Rolo Runs the City _. And, of course, you can hit me up on X at Rolo Runs the City. And, of course, not to forget, we also have RoloRunsTheCity.com where you can cop my merch, check out my new music and all my happenings that's happening with Rolo Runs the City. And remember, wherever you get your streaming at, whether it's consumed by audio or video, you could definitely hit up Spotify or YouTube for the content. But without further ado, we have a great episode for you today. And we're going to talk about Hollywood influence and the death of the independent man. Okay. Reason why I thought this was a great episode to bring up is because obviously, we've had several happenings that have been going on not only the past few years, but even in the past month. You had a lot of crazy activity going on with many celebrities actually talking absolutely reckless in reference to what men and what people should be thinking, as opposed to allowing them to disseminate information, get it themselves, and kind of see how they're going to determine on what's going to be the next move. So the reason why I say that is because you have so many people right now that are causing massive influence in reference to the masses. And unfortunately, we have a thing called the sheeple, which are people who are like sheep. And you have these herders, which are your elites, that are directing where everybody needs to go in reference to what they think and how they feel and how they should be living their lives, as opposed to people having full autonomy for their life and taking life by the horns and just steering where they want to go. So, of course, we want to bring up a few things, right? There's always been a big rumor about Hollywood and the government and incentives and things of that nature. But we do know that the CIA has a department, okay, that's called the Entertainment Liaison Office. Obviously, they're into several different things in reference to entertainment, and you guys can definitely check that out. Feel free to, search it on the web, Google, whatever you want to do. But definitely check out Entertainment Liaison Office under the CIA. This is obviously CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, which is a government agency. And they have their own department in reference to entertainment. So obviously, that's kind of weird all on its own. It's like, okay, what does the federal government have to do with Hollywood? Well, that's what we're going to get into. And then, of course, the Department of Defense, or should I say the Department of War now, how it's been recategorized. They also work directly with Hollywood, okay? And you already know the narrative influences, grants Hollywood access to massive, government assistance in reference to things that they want to have, things they want to borrow, things of that nature, just trying to financially secure their position in society, right? But anyway, this is one crazy thing right here, okay? And obviously, we all know this. Thinking about the future is what makes the present possible. But if someone else is shaping how you think, then your future really isn't yours. And I'm not saying that in reference to people who are trying to inject positive influence in your life. I'm talking about people who are trying to inject their narrative, make it your narrative so it can fulfill their agenda. Okay? For example, you have many people that are speaking out of numerous things that are going on in the United States in reference to immigration, in reference to what's going on in Venezuela, things of that nature. And my thing is, you have to be man or woman, of course, enough to kind of get the story from all angles and then, of course, come to your own conclusion as opposed to buying someone else's story and adopting it to be yours. In actuality, then you're not free thinking, you're not exercising critical thinking, and that's something that should be frowned upon because of the fact that you deserve the right to have control of your own life, your own thoughts, and come up with your own decisions. And indecision, obviously, we've talked about in the past, doesn't bode well for anybody. So it's always imperative to make sure that if there's a decision that's being made, because at the end of the day, it's your life that has to live and abide by that decision. It's always good to get advice, but remember, the person who's giving you advice is not going to be living your truth. So that's something that you have to make up on your own. Okay. So with that being said now, most men realize how much worldviews that they have are actually being outsourced to someone else. So you may feel a certain way about what's going on in the world, but it's because you've adopted somebody else's narrative on it, as opposed to coming up to your own, coming up with your own conclusion, right? You got movies, TV, celebrity culture. That's soft programming. You know what I mean? And the reason why I say that is because they do things that are very subtle. You have some celebrities slash activists now who are very down outright with it. They're dense when they come with their conclusions about how they feel about the right or the left or whatever it is politically, whatever political climate they want to push. That's something that they wear on their sleeve. A lot of times they're very emotional. They wear their heart on their sleeve, and that's not a very pragmatic approach. And I don't recommend anybody to live in that manner because of the fact that if you're living based off of emotion, well, you're just a slave to your passion, and you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you're actually being very pragmatic and thinking with logic as opposed to emotion. Emotion leads you nowhere. It leads you in despair. But when you're thinking logically, working with reason, it allows you to come to a conclusion, reach a resolution, so on and so forth. Like I said, it's always better to respond than to react. Okay? People think, oh, isn't that the same? No, it's not the same. Reacting is instinct, very similar to what animals do in the jungle. Okay? Responding is being very calculated and coming up with a plan prior to execution. You guys know this already. You guys watch my stuff. But, your favorite actor may be displaying his views, and now you're adopting it as your views. And I will tell you like this. There's a lot of guys that I watch on movies, TV shows, or whatnot. I mean, it's not like, I'm not saying I'm a couch potato, but I do sit back, relax, and I do Netflix and chill with my lady, right? Obviously, that's something we do. But at the end of the day, I always try to hold the art separate from the man or the woman, because if you mix two of the same, then you're being a hypocrite. Because I will tell you this, right? As an R&B artist, I loved R. Kelly, right? We all know that R. Kelly was up to no good, right? But what I've learned, and you learn how to compartmentalize as you get older, you separate the man from the art. So even though you may love his music, but you don't love his actions, you know how to separate the two. People get too emotionally involved with the character and the work, and then it becomes evolved into the person, and they either adopt their ideologies or they want to condemn them and send them to hell. Either or, it's emotion based. Okay. And not to mention, if it weren't for the fact that R. Kelly was around, a lot of you guys wouldn't even exist. Okay. Because obviously we know he made nothing but baby making music. And I'm sure that many of the population, especially in the urban community, we can attest to this, that many of these children that are out here today are thanks to Robert Kelly. It is what it is, right? Laugh if you want to. It's okay, man. Smiling is good. You can laugh. It's all right. Don't worry about it. But anyway, it is what it is, right? And we're talking about how influencing, just how Hollywood works when they want something, okay? And obviously we talked about how they, collaborate with government agencies such as the CIA, things of that nature. And like I said, if you don't believe me, all you got to do is Google this stuff. It pops right up, all right? They're not hiding it. It's out in plain sight. It's up to you whether if you want to do your research or not, okay? But this is how Hollywood works when it comes to influencing what they want. They want funding, they want access, they want distribution, and they want protections. And of course, we're talking about all this stuff financially, right? And government agencies, what they want is a favorable perception, trust, and they want compliance. At the end of the day, that's just what they want, okay? The trade-off is you show us in a good light, we give you what you want. And unfortunately, Hollywood bends over backwards, and that's just how the partnership works, okay? But this is no secret. This is just stuff that they've done, for years. There's a great movie. I believe it was directed by John Carpenter back in the day. It was back in like the mid 80s or whatnot. And this was when Roddy Piper was, the famous wrestler. He was actually in a great movie along with Keith David called They Live. I recommend anybody to watch this movie, They Live. I'm not going to kill this plot for you, but you need to watch They Live, okay? This was before The Matrix was released. This was The Matrix before The Matrix, okay? You definitely have to check this movie out. It's called They Live, starring Roddy Piper, former WWF at the time, of course, now WWE, wrestler, rest his soul, and the actor Keith David. Great movie. Got to check it out, okay? But it pretty much breaks everything down. And like I said, it was The Matrix before The Matrix. They just had sunglasses. And you guys will see what I'm talking about. If you guys check out the movie, feel free to leave it in the comments. Let me know what you think about it, because it was an amazing movie. And this was stuff that came out in the mid 80s. So it goes to show you what the thinking was back then. Everyone knew. And there was still pushback some way, somehow. Okay, not everybody was all about, oh, this is the narrative the government wants. Well, this is what we're going to do then. No, like there were some pushback by a lot of directors who didn't comply. So it works both ways. But anyway, for me, okay, we're talking about when you pay attention to a lot of these celebrities and they're trying to push an issue, that's a huge red flag, okay? And the reason why I say that is because, it's easy for them to advocate, but they never pay the price for what's going on. There's no accountability there. And the reason why I say that is because millionaires speaking for the people that they can't even relate to. They don't live like them or anything of that nature. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, red carpet activism, from a gated community is definitely a red flag. You know what I mean? And, there's no accountability for their consequences, okay? A lot of people right now, they're in the political landscape, mind you, as celebrities. And this is how political violence occurs. If somebody feels strongly about saying, oh, well, we don't like the president, and they're feeling strongly about that, they're just voicing their opinion on how they feel, because it does not bode well for their business and their agenda, and they have no relation whatsoever to the average Joe who goes out there, works a 9 to 5, or a 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and 11 to 7. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to George Strait. But for real, old shift work, right? They don't have. They've lost touch of what's going on. Okay. They've lost touch of being inside the community with regular, normal people. And what happens is you get a lot of these guys, they're talking a lot of rah rah stuff. They pump the masses up. Then somebody says, well, so and so is going to have this public event over here, and somebody wants to go ahead and they want to go and squat down on a roof, get a good vantage point, and try to take somebody out with a sniper rifle. Okay? A lot of times people are saying that this is political violence from one side targeting the other. Some people are saying it's the same side targeting their own people to make it look like the other side did it. Nobody knows. That's all conspiracy theories. But at the end of the day, a lot of celebs don't help with this. And it seems like they more invoke violence as opposed to preventing it. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people are sheep. A lot of people, unfortunately, I'm not going to say, they're not intelligent, but evidently they can't think for themselves, because if they did, they would understand, hey, if I get caught, if this happens, I'm the one that has to pay the price for it. I'm the one that has to deal with the consequences. So don't live in a dogmatic lifestyle, which means basically don't live based off of someone else's decision making, because if you're letting that influence you, then you're going to end up living in a world of hurt while they still get to, move on and take off in their $80,000 to $150,000 car. If they're driving Bugattis, hell, they may be driving around an $8 or $10 million car. Okay, and now you're locked up behind bars because you got pumped up, because you felt like one of the jokers from the Avengers wanted to speak out against the government, and you want to take matters into your own hands, and he gets to go back to his gated community, or she gets to go back to their gated community, and you're the one that's got to go get processed in the county and possibly get arraigned, court date, and next thing you know, you're sentenced and you're long gone. It is what it is, right? But that's how that stuff occurs. It's unfortunate, but that's life. People are doing stuff like that. And I feel like with men, we really have to be careful, because they're targeting men, okay? And I'll tell you like this. A lot of men in today's landscape, they feel ignored. They feel like they're not being listened to. And it's absolutely unfortunate. And the reason is because as men in society, everyone has expected us to remain very stoic, keeping our feelings suppressed, and not saying anything outside of the social norm of who we are. At the end of the day, yeah, we think logically and we do what we're supposed to do. We're very A to B. We're not so complex, as opposed to a woman who has many complexities on life and how they see things and how things should work. We're very ABC, where they're more like calculus. You know what I mean? And there's no knock to them. They have a great cerebral way of thinking, and so do we, but we're more logical on how we move, predominantly. But unfortunately, a lot of men are being ignored. They feel like they're not being seen. And who knows if that's the catalyst of why many men are trying to transition into females, because of the fact that they feel like they're being ignored and they want all eyes on them. First of all, I think it's a weak play. They shouldn't do that. God, to me, I'm sorry, I'm a God-fearing man. I feel like God makes no mistakes. He puts you in the body you belong in. Whatever your orientation is, it is what it is. Some people say, oh, in Christianity, they condemn people who are homosexuals. That's none of us, for us to actually say. That's something that's determined by our Creator, our Maker, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. God made you the way you are. And they always say in church, come as you are. So you don't always have to have a 3-piece suit. We just tell you don't go in there in your birthday suit. But it is what it is, right? But I'm just being absolutely honest. At the end of the day, a lot of men are being ignored. So that's something that could really trigger off most folks. Not everybody understands or comes from a harsh upbringing to where they know how to navigate those waters. Okay? But, independent men are harder to control. You got to think about this, right? And this is the reason why we feel like we're being targeted. They're harder to control, which means that we're not so compliant, okay? We don't need narratives from a beta male's thinking. And my thing is, to me, categorizing a beta male is someone else a man who's been compromised, okay, who's for sale, instead of living out his own truth, instead of knocking somebody the hell out, and you want to go ahead, and throw a fight because you're trying to get a bag. I'm not calling anybody out specifically. I'm just saying you don't want to be compromised, okay? Or if somebody puts you, to do a performance and you're wearing a dress on stage, but you're a man and you've been a man your whole life, but now they've got you wearing a dress on stage, or because the contracts sound right and you don't want to knock this guy the hell out because if you knock him out, then it's going to be a breach of contract. You're not going to get the bag that you want. There's several different examples of people who have been sold, okay? They're for sale. These are not people that I would particularly listen to because of the fact that you understand they have a price. And you can say, well, everybody has a price. Well, everybody has to make their money, and I totally get that. But when it comes to like going against your morals and your moral compass, that's when you have to kind of back up and say, this isn't for me. I got to go ahead and go the other direction, because at the end of the day, there's been plenty of people that have gotten approached by the powers that be to work for them and to go at a certain capacity to actually hurt their community as opposed to promote and help them. And they've refused. And they say, okay, well, I may have to wait a little bit longer for my check, but I know my money is good money, because not all money is good money, especially when it comes under the duress, stress, and pain of your own community. You definitely don't want to do that. Okay? And you got to think about how distraction is. And distraction works because it's easy to be entertained rather than to be educated. Okay? Obviously, we know it takes time to be educated, but it takes zero time to be entertained. Everybody could laugh at a good old comedy, or anybody could go ahead and just marvel at someone's athletic ability in sports or whatever it is. It's easy to be entertained, but to be educated is going to take a lot of brain power. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of time in reference to actually taking in the content, learning the content, and becoming better from the content. Whatever it may be, whatever curriculum you're studying, whatever. It's a lot easier to be entertained than to be educated. Okay? And then victimhood is easy because who doesn't mind finger pointing, right? And the reason why I say that is you got a lot of people who will actually finger point as opposed to take accountability. Now, I know when I was in the military, when they tell you, oh, well, so-and-so got fired from the position. Well, they didn't necessarily lose their job. They just got removed from a position. They got put somewhere else that were no longer in charge. I mean, they still were making their pay. They were still getting paid on the 1st and 15th. They were still the pay grade they were at. They were just no longer in charge. And some people, it hurts, especially hurts their ego. And the reason being is that people get a trip off of being in a position of power. So at the end of the day, that's the one thing that really hurts most folks, is the fact that it's like, oh, I got fired. Well, in the civilian sector, you get fired, you lose your job, then you just lose your job and you lose your pay. You're no longer with the company. So people would rather finger point as opposed to take accountability, because at the end of the day, they're trying to save their own ass so they don't hurt their bottom line, which is getting their check at the end of the week. But, accountability is hard, man. But my thing is, I'd rather be accountable for what I'm doing as opposed to being weak and like succumbing to the pressure of not being accountable. Okay? Because if you're not accountable, all you're doing is you're playing the victim card. And that will get you nowhere. It doesn't get you respect, and it definitely doesn't get you the outcome you want. You think it does, but it doesn't. Okay? And a man who can think for himself is dangerous to a system that requires compliance. And the reason why I say that is because you have so many people who are going one direction, and then you got that outlier that wants to go to the other direction. Well, he's not easy to control. Well, that just kind of frustrates a system, okay? He's a key cog to that system. And it's not because he's the missing piece that the system needs. It's that he's a rogue system. He's a rogue cog in a system that does not require any rogue pieces. Okay? There's a possibility that rogue cog may end up in a position where they can actually speak to the masses and start waking a lot of people up from this quote unquote matrix. And I think that's one of the problems that many elites, government agencies, things of that nature see, and they try to do what they can to eliminate that issue. Somebody starts speaking about big pharma, they start speaking negative about it. Next thing you know, they silence them one way or another. They disappear. We just don't know where they're at. They find a way to quiet down people who hurt their bottom line. That's just is what it is. So that's the reason why I say that it's easier to go ahead and keep the sheeple moving along. But when you got that rogue piece that's supposed to be along with the rest of the sheeple, well, there's a possibility that he may end up waking up more folks, or she, either or. Okay? But here's a mindset shift for you. Okay, you got to stop taking advice from entertainers who have ulterior motives. At the end of the day, what they want to do is they want to make sure that you stay locked into their content. Okay, while they're producing, you're consuming. While you're spending, they're accruing. Okay, they're making all that money at the end of the day, and you are the product. Okay, it's no different than what it was back in the day with TV ratings. Now they're doing it through social media and people who are doom scrolling. You are the product, my friend. Okay, you have to set up parameters to ensure that you don't become victim of that. I don't care if you got a 10-minute timer of hey, need a break. I know Instagram has stuff like that. I'm not sure if Facebook does, but it keeps you from doom scrolling, lets you know, damn, I've been on this thing 10 minutes already. Let me get off. Okay. Sometimes we need those things. Okay. But you have to really think about that. And if you believe it, remember the beneficiary of all of it is really the celebrities. They're the ones who benefit from you believing their beliefs, because again, it furthers their agenda. Okay. And that's one thing you have to think about. Okay. If it doesn't build your body, if it doesn't build your mind or your income and increases your discipline, you need to stay away from it, because that's one thing's for sure. A lot of these celebs, they base their careers off of these foundations, which is building their body, their mind, their income, their discipline. And they're showing you how it's done, but they're just not telling you, hey, you can do it too. And what people fail to realize is when all the parties aren't working together so the money can continue to flow, well, that's when it looks like when capitalism starts to become communism. You become too top heavy, where your one percenters are damn near in control of 60 to 65% of the nation's revenue. And you have the 99%, which is everybody else, who's fighting for the remaining 35 to 40% of the revenue that's out there. And I think it was Jim Rohn I heard back in the day, which was, a long-term mentor of many of these self-help gurus. He said, if you gave everybody the equal money that was distributed all around the world, soon it will be back in the same pockets. And the reason why he's saying that is because, sure enough, everybody who had the equal disbursement of revenue would soon blow it. They wouldn't grow it. And the same people who had the disciplines of actually being that 1% will still remain the 1%, because they would use the system to their advantage. They say, hey, we know how to hold. We know how to build. They know how to spend. And that's what they do. So anyway, I think that was something that was absolutely key. Okay. But if someone doesn't share your consequence, I mean, you shouldn't get their attention. And the reason why I say that, and it's not off, because if you're going to do something, if you're going to be an outlier, if you're going to go speak out on something, but you're actually speaking out on someone else's beliefs, okay? Let's just say actor A said, well, we don't believe in the government no more. There's no more democracy, and we're not going to be compliant, right? And then you're like, all right, cool. I'm not going to be compliant either. And next thing you know, You go out there, do some crazy stuff. Okay, I don't even want to mention it, but you do something crazy with a group of people, and next thing you know, you're getting ready to get processed to be locked up, possibly be on death row, all because actor A wanted to run his mouth, you wanted to have his belief, and you wanted to execute on something that he never would have done or she never would have done. So you have to really take heed to that stuff. You know what I mean? And you have to physically protect yourself. Okay? I mean, I really mean this. Your celebs, they're quick to advocate for you, right? Not really. Okay? They advocate from afar. When you're physically protecting yourself, you don't put yourself in harm's way. Many of these people go out there to protest. And what happens is they're going out there and they're protesting. Where are these celebrities at? Like I said, they want to advocate from their gated community. They want to advocate, on the red carpet. But they're not out there in the trenches protesting with you, trying to make change, going to the state house, trying to make things different, trying to go to the federal government. Hey, how can we do this? How can we do that to better their community? They're not going to do it because it is what it is. They're out there to manipulate the masses so then that way they can continue to do what they're doing. What's crazy is you got one part of the government that's advocating for these celebs, and you have another part of the government that's just like, well, they're not being compliant and you're trying to shut them up. I mean, you already seen what happened. I think it was like sometime last year how they tried to cancel Jimmy Kimmel. And he ended up, he was off the air a few days, and then next thing you know, he was back on. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of conflictions. There's a lot of contradictions, things of that nature, where, like I said, they advocate for Hollywood, but yet they can cancel them at the same time if they're not compliant, if they're going against government. So it's like it's a tug of war, man. But you cannot allow that to be you. You cannot be a part of that tug of war. At the end of the day, you have to think for yourself, okay? Real men don't wait for permission to think. They don't need a script, okay? And they don't seek applause. They lead by example. So that's what I expect all my men to do, is to lead by example. Stop thinking someone else's thoughts and think for yourself. And I'm not saying that you can't have the same beliefs as somebody else, but make sure they actually are relative to your ideals. You can say, hey, man, I feel that too. Because, I mean, trust me, there's a lot of people out there that I'm like, hey, I think the same way. It's not so much I'm following what they're saying, but it's like, wow, it's good to see that I'm not the only one that thinks that way. So that's basically what I'm saying about that. But anyway, man, I wanted to point this out. And the reason why I'm saying it is because no matter what way, shape, or form, political violence is dangerous. So don't get involved in it. If you're super into the politics, I recommend you start backing up from it a little bit, because at the end of the day, they're going to put whoever they want to put in the White House. They're going to put whoever they want to put in Congress. They're going to put whoever they want to put in the Senate, and even in your local municipalities. It's going to be the same thing, man. They're going to put whoever they want to put. If you think your vote matters, then vote. If you don't think if your vote doesn't matter, then don't vote. But don't complain when change doesn't occur, because at the end of the day, you don't have any skin in the game if you didn't go and vote, because you say, oh man, my vote don't matter anyway. And I'm going to tell you just like this, your vote may not matter, but if you're going to complain about something, let me know. It's like, yeah, man, I voted for so-and-so. Okay, all fine and well. You have a right to argue. You know what I mean? But if you're going to say, oh, we want to do this and we want to do that and we want reform here, we want reform there, but you're not stepping foot into some sort of state house to get those things done, then I recommend you just shut the hell up. It is what it is. But anyway, I am so grateful for you guys checking me out this week, man. Like I said, man, feel free to check me out on all the socials, man. Don't forget to hit up RoloRunsTheCity.com. Like I said, I got my merch there, man. You guys already know what it is. And I truly do appreciate everyone checking me out this week. And I know this may sound like a political topic, but not really. What I want people to understand that you have the right to live your life the way you want to live and have full autonomy over your life, as opposed to adapting somebody else's ideology to live how they want you to live. But in actuality, are you really living your truth? Okay, so I want you guys to understand that. But look, y'all take care. Godspeed. I greatly do appreciate you guys checking me out. And you guys already know, man, be the goat, never a sheep, and don't sleep on your dreams. Peace.